You stand in a crowded room, talking. You laugh when they laugh. You fix their coffee, answer their messages at midnight. Forgive the same small betrayals again and again. People call you kind, dependable, the one who always shows up. And yet, when the lights go down, you feel a peculiar tiredness, as if the world has folded itself around everyone else and left you thin, almost transparent. You begin to wonder, why, after giving so much of yourself, do you feel unseen? What if the answer isn't out there at all, but inside you, beneath the part of you that posts photos, pays the bills, and smiles through bad news? What if the real story that decides whether you are seen or invisible, bold or timid, angry or serene, is being written in a place you barely notice? The unconscious. This is the quiet revolution Carl Gustav Jung began more than a century ago. Not a revolution of policy or politics, but of the self, an idea that everything we notice about our lives is only the tip of a vast internal iceberg. Jung taught that beneath our waking thoughts lies a hidden theater where gods, shadows, and images rearrange our motivations and choices. The unconscious, he argued, is not merely a repository for forgotten memories. It is a living, mysterious force that shapes our destiny, our relationships, and the stories we tell ourselves about who we are. So tonight, we ask a simple but dangerous question. What if the life you're living isn't the life you were meant to live, because you never met the part of you that decides what you want? In this video, we will follow Jung's trail into that hidden country. We'll meet the actors who take the stage when you're not looking. The archetypes, ancient, universal figures that recur across cultures and dreams. The shadow, the repressed, rejected self that still demands recognition. The anima and animus, the inner feminine and masculine images that color every relationship. We'll explore the well of psychic energy Jung called libido, not simply libido as sexual force, but the currency of attention and vitality that powers creativity, love, and courage. And we'll trace the path Jung named individuation, the slow, risky work of integrating these hidden forces so you can live with a greater measure of freedom and authenticity. This is not an abstract lecture. Imagine a promising artist who abandons a canvas because the inner critic, an aspect of the shadow, whispers that the work is worthless. Imagine a partner who, unable to see their own need for autonomy, clings and thus triggers the very rejection they fear. Imagine a person who follows a career map handed down by family and never asks whether it matches the pulse of their unconscious calling. These are ordinary tragedies, and Jung's theory gives us a map to navigate them. But beware, Jung's revolution doesn't flatter. It names uncomfortable truths. The unconscious is not only a source of creativity and wisdom, it is also the staging ground for the impulses we deny: jealousy, envy, cruelty, cowardice. To engage the unconscious honestly requires courage, the willingness to meet the parts of ourselves we would rather ignore. It asks us to stop blaming only the world and begin to listen to the quiet, sometimes stubborn voice within. Why does this matter now? Because modern life has taught us to be visible as performance, constant availability, curated personas, and an endless stream of choices. Yet visibility is not the same as being known. You can be the most present person in a room and still be invisible to yourself. Jung's insight is urgent because it gives us tools not to become more visible to others, but to become visible to ourselves. That visibility, Jung believed, is the foundation of authentic action, meaningful relationships, and deep inner freedom. Over the next chapters, we will pull back the curtain on how the unconscious speaks, through dreams, symptoms, compulsions, and synchronicities. We will learn how to decode the archetypal patterns that keep repeating in your life, and how to reclaim psychic energy stolen by habit and fear. And we will hear stories, historic, clinical, and painfully human, that show what happens when people finally meet their shadow and, paradoxically, stop being invisible. So let me ask you plainly, one last time. Who is living your life, your conscious self, polished and polite, or the orchestra of hidden forces playing just out of sight? If you're ready to meet what you've not yet met, to reclaim a power that has always been yours yet remains untapped, come with me. Carl Jung called it a revolution of the soul. It begins not with a manifesto, but with a single, honest look in the dark. You are about to be guided deeper into the machinery that quietly shapes your choices, your loves, and your failures. Picture the mind not as a single lamp, but as a city at night. Some streets lit, some alleys dark, a river running through it carrying people, goods, and rumors. What you call your conscious will, the decisions you announce to the world, are like the public squares. But beneath, under bridges and behind shuttered windows, life moves in ways that determine which squares become crowded and which grow lonely. Jung asked us to take that subterranean life seriously. He called it the unconscious, and he insisted it was not merely a dustbin of old memories but a living economy, with its own images, motives, and currents of energy. Imagine psychic energy as a currency you use every day without thinking. Attention, desire, creative force. Where you spend it matters. You pour it into work, relationships, habits, grudges. Sometimes the flow is deliberate. You choose to apply yourself to a painting, a child, a study routine. Sometimes the flow is stealthy. A childhood wound siphons off your vitality in the form of repetitive, anxious thinking. Jung named this currency libido, not to shrink it to sexual life, but to broaden it into the totality of life's psychic investment. In this economy, health is not merely a matter of having energy. It's about where that energy goes and whether the flows are under your supervision. To see how this turns into drama, meet a woman named Noor. Noor is the kind of person who always shows up. At work, she volunteers for the invisible labor, organizing team lunches, smoothing tense meetings, staying late to finish other people's projects. In relationships, she is the steady presence, replies late-night texts, rearranges plans to accommodate friends, forgives betrayals she thinks she should forgive. On the surface, she is reliable, generous, a good person, but a pattern develops. The generosity becomes expected. The extra labor becomes the standard. When Noor finally asks for recognition, or for her own needs to be met, the request feels strange to others, and some react with resentment. Why? Because energy had been allocated away from Noor herself and toward the roles she played. Her psychic currency was not available to demand reciprocity. Her persona, her socially useful mask, had become a kind of public utility that drained her private resources. This is what Jung means when he says the persona is adaptive but dangerous. We need masks to navigate society. They protect and help us. But when the persona monopolizes psychic energy, the inner life is starved. The consequence is not only fatigue, it is the gradual erosion of authenticity. You begin to inhabit a role with less access to the impulses, desires, and capacities that once made you feel alive. You may perform endlessly and still feel unseen, because the energy that animates visibility was not returning to a coherent inner center. If the persona is the mask, the shadow is what the mask hides. The shadow is not merely negative traits we've done wrong. It is everything we've disowned, qualities, desires, and capacities we were taught to reject. Envy, anger, laziness, arrogance, they all can lodge in the shadow, but so can courage, raw creativity, or a taste for a life unconventional in a way your family would disapprove of. The crucial point is that rejection does not make the content vanish. It goes underground and gathers force. It becomes this silent engine that shapes your reactions in precisely the ways you would least like. Consider the partner who is forever complaining that their spouse is distant, only to discover they themselves have been the one to withdraw emotionally, afraid to ask for what they need. Or the talented musician who never performs because a shadow voice tells them, "You'll be humiliated." They swear the world is unfair. They do not see how the shadow's exiled edicts are drafting their life script. Because the shadow operates out of sight, it is more persuasive than any public argument. It is the backstage crew moving set pieces while the actors believe they are free. Then there are complexes, miniature dramas with their own actors, scripts, and energy. A complex is a cluster around a theme, usually rooted in an emotionally charged experience. The mother complex, the rejection complex, the perfectionist complex, each behaves like a small, autonomous system. Trigger a relevant stimulus and suddenly reason dissolves into a replay of old pain. You might plan to respond to criticism with calm and curiosity, and yet a complex can hijack your attention and produce a disproportionate reaction: shame, rage, withdrawal. that surprises you afterwards. Complexes are efficient. They memorize patterns, respond quickly, and preserve themselves. They are not villains. They are survivors in a psyche that has to manage wounds and threats. But because they are efficient, they are also rigid, and rigidity is the enemy of conscious choice. Another trick the unconscious plays is projection. Projection is a mirror trick. You notice qualities in others that are actually energized in you, but remain unowned. For instance, you might be infuriated by someone's arrogance, yet the intensity of the reaction is a clue that arrogance has been exiled within you. Projection is artful because it makes the inner visible without demanding accountability. You can point an accusing finger at the world while the scene inside you remains unexplored. Relationships become battlegrounds of projection. Lovers pull from each other the missing parts, sometimes healing, sometimes repeating injury. The man who constantly seeks an independent partner may be fleeing his own need for autonomy. The woman who sees every man as a betrayer may be haunted by an unresolved abandonment complex. Recognizing projection is like noticing that a play's critics are actually reading lines from their own scripts. Perhaps the most intimate archetypes Jung described are the anima and animus, the inner feminine in men and the inner masculine in women. These are not merely about gendered behavior. They form the unconscious template for how we experience the other, particularly in erotic life. If your anima or animus is undeveloped, you will encounter the opposite sex as a projection screen for fantasy or fear. Romance then becomes either an idolizing dream or a recurring nightmare. When these figures are integrated, relationships become a place for mutual transformation rather than mutual rescue or mutual annihilation. All of this converges on a single dramatic thesis. You are not a lone captain steering an autonomous ship. Rather, you are the meeting place of conscious intention and a host of unconscious currents, each carrying its own freight. To live well, Jung argues, we must become artisans of attention, learning where energy goes and how to reclaim it. And that reclamation is the task Jung named individuation, the process by which a person becomes more fully themselves by acknowledging, integrating, and reorienting the energies of their unconscious. Individuation is neither a moral sermon nor a checklist. It is a long, risky education in inner honesty. It often begins with symptoms and failures, a depression that will not lift, a relationship that always collapses at the same point, a crisis of meaning that collapses the map you've trusted. These are not merely problems to be fixed. They are signals that the psyche is attempting to rebalance itself. Jung's prescription is not to suppress these signals, but to listen, to decode the symbolic language they use. Dreams are primary among those symbols. Jung taught that dreams are not literal messages, but symbolic communications from the unconscious, offering images that want to be recognized, integrated, or transformed. A dream of a ruined house might not warn of a literal collapse. It might suggest neglected inner rooms, talents abandoned, grief unspent. To engage a dream is to practice a new kind of attention. You do not immediately interpret or judge. You hold the image, ask, where in my life does this echo? And look for associations. Over time, the pattern of dreams will reveal the architecture of complexes and the circling motifs of archetypes. Active imagination is another tool Jung used, a disciplined conversation with inner figures. Rather than treating images as obscure, you animate them. Ask them questions, write their answers, let them speak in scenes. It sounds oddly theatrical, but it is effective. By entering into dialogue, you stop being a purely reactive creature and begin to negotiate with parts of you that were previously exiled. The artist who confronts the inner critic by asking, "Why do you speak so sharply?" may discover an injured child or a rigid rules enforcer that can be soothed, thanked, or restructured. Philosophically, Jung moves us toward a different notion of freedom. Modernity often equates freedom with choice and visibility. More options, more exposure, more self-branding. Jung suggests a paradoxical freedom that arises from inner containment and honest allocation of energy. Freedom is not simply the ability to choose between many alternatives. It is the capacity to choose from a settled center that knows where its energy belongs. Someone who is always available may have many external freedoms: mobile phone, social access, but lacks the internal authority to say no. The individuated person, by contrast, has a sovereign relationship with inner demands. They are not immune to unconscious influence, but they are in conversation with it. This is not an easy program. Integrating the shadow means acknowledging unflattering things about yourself. It means ceasing to blame the world as the sole author of your misery. It requires rites of honesty, admitting envy, anger, or the desire to abandon roles that suffocate. It also requires practices of containment, learning to reserve attention for your own life so you can cultivate projects that are truly yours. On a practical level, this might mean saying no, conserving time, building rituals that reconnect you to sources of psychic energy, creative practice, solitude, nature, or disciplined work. It might mean therapy, dream journals, or creative work that translates inner images into forms the conscious mind can handle. There is also an ethical dimension. When you own your shadow, you are less likely to project it into others and thereby create needless suffering. You stop recruiting partners and friends to play out your old dramas. You become less unbearable to the people you love because you are less tyrannized by unconscious expectations. Individuation, in this sense, is not merely self-centered. It is relationally liberating. The more you integrate, the less you unconsciously demand others to be your missing pieces. Finally, Jung's vision invites a humble awe. The unconscious is not a toolbox to be mastered once and for all. It is a continuing conversation. New stages of life, midlife, aging, major losses, call for renewed attention because the psyche's currents shift as circumstances change. The journey Jung recommends is not a one-off heroic conquest, but an ongoing practice. Noticing where your energy drifts, listening to your dreams, naming the patterns that repeat, and gradually allowing the exiled parts to take their place at the table. So ask yourself, what has been quietly spending your psychic currency? Which persona are you feeding at the cost of your own wants? Which shadowed talents are waiting, resentful, to be reclaimed? The answers are not immediate or easy. They arrive in fragments, in dreams, in the discomfort that comes when you finally set a boundary. But they arrive. And once you begin to track the flow of your inner economy, you can begin to redirect it toward work that matters, toward relationships that sustain, and toward a life that is finally, to borrow Jung's word, not divided, but whole. What if the very thing you believe makes you worthy, the tireless giving, the open door, the unbroken stream of availability, is the thing that erases you? It is a question most people avoid, because it slices at the heart of what we've been told is virtuous. We are raised on stories of selflessness, of devotion, of the noble sacrifice. We are taught to believe that to be wanted, we must always be reachable, that love will come if we are indispensable. Yet in Jung's language, this is the perfect recipe for a slow psychic death. The truth is unsettling. The more constantly available you are, the more invisible you can become. It is not malice. It is a law of human perception. What is always there fades into the background. The chair you sit on each morning does not astonish you. The air in your lungs rarely inspires gratitude. In relationships, the endlessly available person risks becoming that chair, that air, necessary but unseen. People are drawn to what holds its own center, not to what erases its edges to fit another's shape. Jung would tell you that this is not just social psychology, it is the unconscious at work. When the persona monopolizes psychic energy, it doesn't merely perform, it hides the self. You pour life force into a role until the role begins to live in your place. Over time, those around you stop engaging with you and start engaging with the role. They interact with the dependable friend, the patient partner, the tireless worker, and not the unpredictable, vibrant human beneath. And when you finally withdraw, whether from exhaustion or self-preservation, they feel betrayed, as though you have abandoned a contract they never had to sign. Here is the counterintuitive heart of it. Boundaries do not push people away, they pull the right ones closer. It is endless availability that repels, not because people dislike it, but because they stop feeling your presence. They stop seeing you as a sovereign being and begin to treat you as an extension of their needs. Jung's work on the shadow explains why this dynamic is so persistent. The parts of us that crave recognition, rest, and self-protection are often exiled into the shadow because they contradict the persona we've chosen. If your identity is built on being the selfless one, then any impulse to refuse, to claim, to rest, feels like a betrayal of your core self-image. You repress it, but repression is not deletion. The repressed self begins to leak through in fatigue, irritability, or sudden outbursts. You might snap at a loved one over something trivial or fantasize about disappearing entirely. The unconscious is making its protest known. Modern life accelerates this erasure. Technology has collapsed the boundaries of time and space. Messages can find you in bed, in the bathroom, at a funeral. Work emails arrive at midnight. Friends expect instant replies. Family group chats overflow with requests and questions. To be unreachable is almost scandalous. Yet this is precisely why psychic exhaustion is at epidemic levels. We are burning energy in an endless loop of outward flow with no return inward. Jung was not a neuroscientist, but his insights find eerie confirmation in modern research. Studies on cognitive load show that constant attentional shifts, responding to every ping, every call, drain working memory and reduce emotional regulation. Psychologists Roy Baumeister and Kathleen Voss have demonstrated that self-control and decision-making draw from a finite pool of mental energy. Overexerting in one domain leads to collapse in others. In Jungian terms, this is psychic depletion, too much libido flowing outward, none returning to replenish the self. It is not just the overgiver who suffers. The same unconscious economy plays out in other guises. Consider the person obsessed with pleasing an audience, literal or metaphorical. Social media thrives on this compulsion. You post, you perform, you receive little jolts of validation. But the archetype running beneath may be the trickster, offering quick attention at the price of long-term authenticity. Soon, the curated self becomes the only self others recognize. To step outside it feels dangerous, even though remaining inside it is draining you dry. Another disturbing truth: what you admire or resent most in others often says more about your own unconscious than it does about them. This is projection in action, and it shapes relationships in ways most people never notice. The colleague whose arrogance drives you mad may embody the assertiveness you've banished to your shadow. The friend whose romantic confidence inspires you may be living out the unlived life of your own anima or animus. Until you reclaim those exiled traits, you will keep seeking or fighting people who carry them for you. This is why so many relationships feel like déjà vu. You are not choosing freely. You are circling the same archetypal pattern. Here is where the tension tightens. If these dynamics are unconscious, what hope do we have of changing them? Jung's answer is maddeningly simple and brutally hard. Make the unconscious conscious. The problem is that consciousness does not arrive like a polite guest. It kicks down the door through crisis. Depression, panic attacks, failed relationships. These are not random misfortunes, but psychic interventions. The self, the deep organizing center, is forcing you to stop. It will not always be kind in its methods. Take the person who is perpetually the strong one for their family. They never break down, never need help, never reveal vulnerability. Then one day they collapse into illness or burnout. Friends say it's sudden, shocking. But from a Jungian view, it is the inevitable revolt of a shadow that contains years of unacknowledged fear, grief, and need. The collapse is not the problem. It's the last available solution. Our culture resists these ideas because they dismantle a cherished myth that we can manage our lives through sheer willpower and constant positivity. Jung's work suggests the opposite. The unconscious will have its due, whether you cooperate or not. The more you suppress it, the more it erupts in disruptive ways. It is like damming a river. You can hold it back for a time, but pressure builds. When the dam bursts, the flood is harder to manage than the stream would have been. Perhaps the most disturbing implication is that much of what we call choice is theater. We imagine we are making free decisions, but if a complex is active, the choice is already rigged. The abandoned child grows up to choose partners who keep them emotionally at arm's length. The humiliated teenager chooses careers that avoid visibility, ensuring they never risk that shame again. In each case, the conscious story is about preference or circumstance. The unconscious story is about repetition and safety. If we apply this to the modern cult of availability, the conclusion is sharp. Many of us are not freely choosing to be always on call. We are compelled by an unconscious need, perhaps to avoid abandonment, perhaps to secure worthiness, to keep feeding the persona until it devours us. This is why setting boundaries feels less like a healthy choice and more like a moral crime. Somewhere deep inside, a complex is whispering that if you stop, you will lose love, safety, identity. That whisper is ancient and powerful. This is the point where Jung's revolution starts to feel dangerous. To reclaim psychic energy, you must defy the very scripts that once kept you safe. You must face the shadow that contains your right to say no. You must accept that some relationships will not survive your return to wholeness. You must allow parts of your old persona to die. And here is the paradox. In dying to those old roles, you begin to live in a way that is not dictated by them. You stop being the air that goes unnoticed and become the wind, sometimes felt, sometimes absent, but always moving from your own center. The unsettling truth is that you will lose people along the way. The liberating truth is that you will keep the ones who can see you.
If the unconscious is the great puppeteer, individuation is learning to hold some of the strings yourself. Not all, never all, but enough to know when you are dancing your own dance and when you are being pulled into someone else's. The cost is high, but the alternative is to live a life written entirely by characters you've never met. And if Jung is right, that is no life at all. It happens in a moment, a single, quiet realization that shakes the ground beneath your feet. You've been doing everything right, always showing up, always answering the call, always being there. You thought this would make people cherish you, hold you close, never let you go. But instead, you've faded into the background. You've become part of the furniture in other people's lives. Seen but not noticed, present but invisible. Carl Jung would call this the paradox of availability. When you give too much of yourself, people stop seeing you as someone extraordinary and start treating you as a constant, a resource that will never run out. And like any resource taken for granted, you are quietly depleted until there's nothing left to give. You thought love was built on selflessness, but what if it's the selflessness that's quietly erasing you? It's the same with choice. We are told that more options equal more freedom, but Barry Schwartz proved otherwise. The moment we have too many doors to choose from, we begin to hesitate, to doubt, to second-guess. Each decision we make feels heavy, shadowed by the haunting thought, was that the right one? And so our so-called freedom becomes a prison of hesitation. In this instant, the illusion shatters. You see the truth, not the one society taught you, but the one you've been too afraid to face. The way you've been living isn't making you more loved or more free. It's quietly suffocating you. And here's the unbearable twist. The solution isn't to give more, but less. Not to open every door, but to choose only the ones that matter. To reclaim your time, your energy, your presence, not as a gift to everyone, but as a treasure offered sparingly with intention. Because when you are everywhere for everyone, you become nowhere for yourself. And the cost of that is your very soul. We often think that the solution to our exhaustion lies in doing more. Giving more, accommodating more, saying yes just one more time. But what if the real answer has been the opposite all along? What if the path to emotional freedom isn't found in expansion, but in narrowing the space where our energy leaks away? Carl Jung believed that every act of giving, every act of attention, every moment of emotional investment is a transaction of psychic energy. The problem is, many of us never audit those transactions. We just keep spending, pouring into relationships, responsibilities, and expectations without ever asking, is this truly mine to carry? It's like leaving a tap running in your home, not because you want to waste water, but because you've forgotten it's even on. The first practical step is boundaries, not as walls to push others away, but as doors that you can choose to open or close depending on what truly aligns with you. Saying no without guilt is not cruelty. It is an act of self-respect. Every time you draw a line, you're telling yourself, my energy matters. My life is not an open reservoir for the world to drain at will. Second, reclaiming psychic energy requires an active process of individuation. Jung's term for becoming fully yourself, separate from the masks you've worn to meet expectations. This means asking hard questions. Am I showing up because I truly want to, or because I fear what will happen if I don't? Am I helping because it aligns with my values, or because I'm afraid of being seen as selfish? Each honest answer is like a brick removed from the wall between who you are and who you're meant to be. And finally, give yourself permission to live authentically, even if it disappoints people who've grown accustomed to your endless availability. You cannot be the hero in everyone's story without disappearing from your own. If we turn to Barry Schwartz's lens for a moment, the same principle applies only in the realm of choice. We live in a time when every decision, from the brand of coffee we buy to the career path we choose, comes with hundreds of possibilities. At first glance, this feels like freedom. But when every door is open, we stand paralyzed in the hallway, unable to commit. The result? Decision fatigue, an exhaustion that leaves us more dissatisfied, even when we make the best choice. Here, the way forward is counterintuitive. Limit your options. Decide ahead of time what matters most and cut out the noise. Practice satisficing, choosing something that is good enough, instead of endlessly chasing the absolute best. The irony is, the more we try to maximize, the less joy we feel. But when we choose simply and commit fully, satisfaction grows. It's not about settling. It's about freeing your mind from the constant churn of what if. In both Jung's and Schwartz's worlds, the key takeaway is the same. Clarity creates freedom. Whether you're drained by giving too much of yourself or overwhelmed by the weight of too many choices, the answer is to define your edges. Life is not meant to be an endless buffet where you must sample everything. It's a garden that flourishes when you decide what to plant and tend to it with intention. And here's the deeper truth. When you reclaim your energy or reduce your choices, you're not losing anything. You're gaining space. Space for presence. Space for joy. Space for the moments that matter. Authentic living isn't about having everything. It's about having the right things and knowing that you chose them deliberately. So, I'll leave you with this question. Have you ever felt invisible despite always being there for others? Or perhaps you've been stuck in the spiral of too many options, each one stealing more time than it gives back. What would your life look like if you began drawing clearer boundaries or narrowing your choices, starting today? If this message resonated with you, I encourage you to share your thoughts in the comments. Not just for me, but for someone else who might read your story and realize they're not alone. And if you found value here, take a moment to like this video, subscribe for more reflections like this, and share it with someone who might need to hear it. Because sometimes the first step toward reclaiming your life is hearing the right words at the right time.